Hey, it's Craig. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Canadian History X early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Hey everyone, Craig Baird here. Before I begin today's story, I want to take a moment to ask you to check me out on Patreon. There are several tiers with great benefits, including ad-free episodes delivered early to patrons. You can also donate directly to the show at www.canadaehx.com through Buy Me a Coffee or through e-transfer at crwbaird@gmail.com. Donations help keep the show going. I've also released my first history book, Canada's Main Street, the epic story of the Trans-Canada Highway. You can find it in most bookstores in Canada and through online retailers. You can find the links for Patreon, donating, and my book in my show notes. Okay, let's get to the show. Black flies hung around her in the damp air as branches tore at her clothes. The mosquitoes engorging themselves on her blood were a mere annoyance as she navigated through the northern bush. She was only focused on one thing, her prospecting claim. Every step she took demanded care. One wrong foot and she would be injured and without help. So far, she had managed alone. She didn't want to be limited because of her sex, and most white men wanted her to act a certain way. She had no time for that. Plus, they would often just slow her down. Her skills out here were unmatched, and she had made it this far on dog sled, canoe, and now on foot. But her mark on history wouldn't be carved out of gold. Instead, this young Indigenous woman walking deeper into the wilderness than society believed she should would make her mark because of her passion for the environment. And she did it decades before anyone spoke publicly about animal rights with any seriousness or urgency. I'm Craig Baird and this is Canadian History X. During National Indigenous History Month, I'm sharing stories of men and women who left their mark, and today I bring you the life of the woman whose courage changed the conscience of a nation. This is the story of Anahareo. Just a quick note, I looked at how to pronounce Anahareo's name and found various sources that differed, but the most common pronunciation was Anahareo, and that's the one I'm going to use through this episode. Anahareo was an Algonquin and a Mohawk. She was raised between two worlds, Indigenous heritage and settler Canada, wilderness and town life, tradition and modernity. But to really understand her, we have to go back to the early 1800s to learn about her grandmother, Marie Catherine Papineau. As a toddler, she survived an attack by soldiers on her village south of Montreal. Her family was killed and she was taken away from the only life she knew. From then on, Catherine grew up within a convent, but she hated the restraints. So when she came of age, she immediately left. She returned to the Mohawk community near Montreal. And by then, the highly intelligent Catherine spoke 6 different Indigenous languages and had a vast understanding of crafts, herbs, and medicine. She lived with her husband John Bernard, and together they had a successful farm where they raised 11 children. But that life would be uprooted by the government when they took the land away from them to give to white settlers. And when that happened, they moved up north near Mattawa, Ontario, where their son Matthew Bernard had married Mary Nash Ockaping. The couple had 6 children between 1892 and 1910, including Gertrude Philemon Bernard, who was born on June 18, 1906. She would become known as Anahareo, but we'll get to that. For now, little Gertie was known as Pony by her dad because of her boundless energy, and Gertie was only 5 years old when in 1994 her mother became ill. She had tuberculosis. Today it kills about 100 Canadians a year. That's about the same as the number of people who die shoveling snow each year. But when Gertie's mom had it, about a century ago, it was a different story. Tuberculosis claimed 10,000 to 14,000 lives annually and was the leading cause of death in Canada. Gertie's mom was one of those lost to the infectious airborne bacterial disease, and that death, it shattered the family. Her father, Matthew, had to travel to work, and that made raising his children difficult, so the siblings were sent to different relatives, and Gertie was placed with her grandmother, Catherine Bernard, whom she adored. The feeling was mutual because Big Grandma loved her too. For the next 6 years, Gertie was taught about the Mohawk culture, customs, and history. But that wasn't all she learned from her beloved family matriarch. Gertie also became strong-willed and free-spirited. She wanted to carve her own path and refused to be boxed in by society, even at an early age. But her happiness would be once again in peril when she was 11, and her grandmother became too frail to care for her. Young Gertie was sent to her aunt, who wanted her niece to follow rules and go to church, but Gertie rebelled. Instead of going to school, she raided neighborhood gardens or went camping and canoeing with her friends, most of which were boys. And as tensions boiled over, her father returned and Gertie went to live with him and her siblings, who were now strangers to her. So she turned inwards, became quiet. The boys she had once hung out with were more interested in girls than camping, so Gertie turned to the one thing that always gave her solace: nature. She was most at home among the trees. Growing up, she had heard stories of prospecting, hunting, and surviving in the wild, and now she couldn't get the idea out of her head. By 1925, the 19-year-old had convinced her father to allow her to spend 3 weeks along Lake Temagami, located 80 kilometers north of North Bay. It stretches for 47 kilometers and has 1,259 islands dotting its waters. For decades, it had been a popular place for people looking to escape the hustle and bustle of southern Ontario, and Gertie had convinced her father to let her go so she could work as a waitress at Camp Obakan. Little did she know, as she made her way north, that the trip would change her life and Canada's history forever. As Gertie arrived at Lake Temagami, the scars of the First World War remained with many. The world seemed to move faster, and to get away, people would go to lodges and canoe camps along the lakeshore. If you wanted some time on the water, there was the steamboat, the Belle of Temagami, which would give you a scenic trip. And that's what Gertie arrived at. She was supposed to only stay for 3 weeks, but she had fallen in love with the area at first sight and quickly convinced the camp secretary to keep her for the entire summer. As the end of the season neared, she sat under a tree reading a book when she heard someone stepping out of their canoe and onto the rocky shore. She looked up as the man immediately caught her attention. He was tall, wearing a chestnut brown shirt and trousers, with a Hudson's Bay Company belt wrapped around his waist. His buckskin vest was heavily worn, as were the moccasins on his feet. She quickly forgot about the book on her lap as she watched him walk up to the camp office. Later, she described him as a mad, dashing character, something like Jesse James, who she saw as the Robin Hood of America. She sat frozen in place, waiting for another sight of him, and watched as he walked back to his canoe. And as he set off for the shore, Gertie ran up to the office to find out who he was. She was told his name was Archie Belaney, but you might know him as Grey Owl. His story is long and interesting, and I shared it back in 2024, and I highly encourage you to listen to that episode to learn how an Englishman fooled the world into thinking he was Indigenous while sparking a conservation movement that helped save the beaver. For now, he was just a man who went by the name of Archie, but he already claimed to be the son of a Scottish man and an Apache woman. And that's how he explained away his blue eyes, and no one really doubted him. Not even the young Mohawk woman who had been captivated by him as he stepped out of his canoe. By now she had found out his name and that he was camping a short distance away. Without much thought, she set out through the woods to find him, and when she did, the first words she heard were, "Say, do you happen to have a bag of potatoes?" She was immediately confused by his odd question, and in the process, the spell he had her on was broken. No longer would she see him as godlike. And that's just how Archie had wanted it. He was keen on breaking the ice, and over the next few days the two spent a lot of time together. She was excited about her new friend, but her time at the lake was coming to an end and she was preparing to go back to her family. And that's when fate stepped in. Dr. Howard out of New York approached her to offer her the chance to further her education. He saw that she was highly intelligent, and he wanted to pay her tuition to any school, college, or convent of her choosing. Now, when she contacted her father, his only request was that it be a Canadian institution, and she chose Loretto Abbey. The all-girls Catholic school had been founded in 1847 and was operated by the Irish Sisters of Loretto. It still exists today as the Loretto Abbey Catholic Secondary School and is ranked as one of the top schools in Canada. But back in 1925, it would be Gertie's school, and as she prepared, her time with this Jesse James of the North ended. But not for long. As he returned to his trapline to the north, Archie sent a letter every day. I'm sorry, did I say letters? I meant books. Because for the first 2 weeks they were apart, he sent her letters that were at least 90 pages, front and back. But then, the letters suddenly stopped. Gertie looked for them daily, but none came. Instead, she got a letter from the Abbey saying she had to wait until the beginning of the next term to enroll, and that meant she had months of waiting ahead of her, and with that extra time, she wrote Archie. Eventually he wrote back, but it wasn't a 90-page letter she'd become used to. Instead, it was just a one-sentence telegram that said, "Please come up for a day or more. Reply yes." And along with it was a train ticket. Her heart was racing as she asked her father's permission, and he was reluctant to have his 19-year-old daughter go off with a 37-year-old man, but in the end he agreed. He told her to be careful as she boarded the train heading to Forsyth in northern Quebec in February 1926 to meet Archie. She arrived full of excitement, grabbed her things, and leapt off the train at the station. Although calling it a station, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Truth is, there was no station, just snow piled up and cleared on a platform. And around her were only 5 houses, and only one had its lights on. Worst of all, Archie was nowhere to be seen. As the train departed, Gertie was left all alone in the middle of nowhere. The distant sound of a howl punctuated the deafening silence. She was an adventurous and capable woman, but anyone would be apprehensive about this situation. As the last train car went past her, her stomach sank further. But that's when she heard Archie yell to her. He had arrived! But there was no orchestra playing as they ran to each other's arms in slow motion. That's because she did not jump into his arms. Instead, Archie walked up to her and shook her hand. Gertie was a bit shocked by the formal greeting. She feared that the love blossoming inside her was one-sided. Gertie's trip was supposed to last a day or two, but when Archie asked her to go to his trapping grounds and stay for a week, she jumped at the offer and asked how far they had to go. And he said, not far. Except that meant trekking 64 kilometers through the snow-covered wilderness. Now, Archie was at home in the bush and traveled constantly, so for him, it was a minor journey, like a trip to the corner store, shall we say. For Gertie, it wasn't exactly that. She said, quote, "After 5 hours of snowshoeing, I was all but crawling on my eyebrows. I was exhausted, but there was nary a word, let alone of sympathy, from my traveling companion. Traveling companion? By this time I was thinking of Archie in less than flattering terms." After about 16 hours of travel, the moon was high above them as Archie and Gertie finally came to what he called the Sunset Lodge. It was a tent, surrounded by snow. Gertie was exhausted, and after such a long journey on foot, it looked like a palace to her, and as soon as she entered the tent, she fell asleep. When she finally woke up, Archie had a surprise for her. He took her a short distance away to a beautiful log cabin he had built. Above the door in canoe pitch were the words, Pony Hall, in reference to her dad's childhood nickname. Inside, she found hand-built log furniture, a moose-hide rug, and a roaring fire in the stove. The bed was covered in a Hudson's Bay Company blanket. She said, "It was the ultimate in charm, and I loved it." For the next week, while Archie checked his trap lines, Gertie explored, and despite the cold she felt, she had found a home. The sounds of birds, the passing wildlife, the clean air, it was everything she could have hoped for. The 2 days turned into a week, then turned into another week, then another, and time began to blend until months had gone by. Before she knew it, she had fallen into a domestic life in the middle of the Quebec wilderness, and in the process became Anahareo. Archie Belaney gave himself the name Grey Owl. He also renamed the woman he loved, but there are a few theories on how Gertrude became Anahareo. The first is that the name is a reference to her great-great-grandfather, Chief Anahareo. The second is that it came from her grandfather, John Anahareo Nelson. The second is that Archie modified the name Anahareo, meaning flaming leaf, to Anahareo. Whatever the origin, Gertie embraced the new name and used it for the rest of her life. Her book, Devil and Deerskins, My Life with Grey Owl, which was a huge help in my research, was not authored by Gertrude Bernard, but Anahareo. Meanwhile, months had gone by, and in the spring of 1926, Anahareo finally received overdue mail. It was all from her father. She had been planning a return home to see him, but when she saw the letter, she quickly changed her mind. He was livid and wrote in one letter, quote, "I have great faith in you, but you aren't home yet, and it's very nearly too late. I guess it is too late, except with me. You'll always be welcome where I am concerned, but I warn you that if you're not married to that man," end quote. She shared the letters with Archie, and when he read them, he replied that there were only two things could happen. Either she went home or they got married. Archie, however, conveniently left out the fact that he was still technically married to his first wife. She was an Ojibwe woman named Angela Aguna. Anahareo didn't know this, but she was still angry. How dare he give her an ultimatum? How dare her father demand she go home? She was sick of not being a mistress of her own destiny, so she did neither. Fuming with rage, Anahareo walked away from Archie and towards the church. It was Easter, and after she gave her confession, the priest asked her if she had anything else to confess. She said no. He then told her that she had to confess her sin of living with an unmarried man in the wilderness. But she didn't believe it was a sin. So Anahareo promptly replied that he could take his absolution and, well, shove it. She stormed out of the church as the priest screamed at her. Anahareo had dreams of opening a dance hall in the mining town nearby, but since she didn't have the money to do it, she didn't want to go home to her father, she decided just to go back to Pony Hall, where at least she had the freedom there to do as she pleased when Archie was away on his traplines. And there, she fell into a quiet routine once more, and things between her and Archie began to improve. However, deep down, she felt guilty about disappointing her father. She might have been a strong-willed woman, but she wasn't free from society's pressures, and at times that guilt turned into anger, like the time the couple went to a party in the nearby town of Doucette. Anahareo had a bit too much fun and ended up indulging in a few too many drinks. Archie took her to her room to sleep it off, and when she woke up the next day, she had a bit of hangxiety. It was a mixture of shame for over-drinking and anxiety over their overall unmarried living situation, so she immediately packed her bags and got ready to go. She wanted to get away from Archie, her father, and whatever guilt she felt internally. She told Archie she was leaving, and he once again insisted that she either marry him or go back to her father. Anahareo replied she wasn't interested in either option. Then she took it a step further and said she didn't love him. Now, she didn't mean it, but her shame had caused her to lash out, and Archie was deeply hurt, so he took her hand and told her she was going home that night. Anahareo promptly grabbed his hunting knife and stabbed him in the arm. When she saw what she did, she ran off, but Archie caught up with her and calmed her down. He said everything would be all right and led her back to her room. She soon realized she was in over her head. Torn between two worlds, she didn't know which way to go. She wanted to be independent, but she also loved Archie. She cared for her father, but wanted to choose her own path. In the end, she chose Archie, because that's where her heart really wanted to be. She was going against society, but she was happy, and in time her heart settled and the guilt subsided. And that's when she noticed that something else had been nagging at her, and had been so for a while. Archie's work as a trapper. Now, it kept them fed and ensured they had money for supplies, but Anahareo was repulsed by the idea of trapping. She found it inhumane. During a trip, she saw a marten that had spent days trying to free itself from a trap only for Archie to kill it with an axe handle hit to the head. She wrote, "The fact that I hated to kill and my ever-present remorse over this now will never right the wrong. I can still hear the screams of the suffering animals, the mink, the marten, fisher, lynx. I still see the poisoned foxes and wolves lying on the frozen lakes, and the drowned beaver and otter at the bottom of the lakes and streams." In the spring of 1928, she joined Archie on one of his trips despite finding the whole idea repulsive. She just wanted to be around him, and this was often the only way to do it. When they came upon a beaver dam, they discovered that the mother had been caught in a trap, but she had cut the anchor line and been pulled to the bottom of the lake with it, where she died. She had left behind 2 beaver kits. Anahareo picked them up and brought them home. She told Archie she wanted to keep them as pets. He wanted to sell them for a particularly good price, and for weeks they argued about it. The little beavers grew up and made themselves at home in the cabin under Anahareo's care. And one night, Archie got into bed, and as he did, one of the beavers went up and sat next to him. Then it began to comb itself, and Archie watched as it then climbed to his face, sniffed it, and then nibbled on his eyebrows, before settling onto his chest to sleep. Archie said only 3 words. He said, "I'll be darned." Over the next few weeks, Archie was stressed and distant. Anahareo thought it was something to do with her, but in reality, Archie was in a deep internal struggle. He simply couldn't trap animals anymore. The interaction with the beaver had changed something in him, and he eventually told Anahareo that he was off the beaver hunt for good. He wrote years later in Pilgrims of the Wild, "I am now the president, treasurer, and sole member of the Society of the Beaver People." In the autumn of 1928, Archie and Anahareo moved to an area of land between Quebec and New Brunswick where they lived off Archie's pension checks from his war service. And in their new cabin, he talked with Anahareo about his life and living off the land in Canada, while their beavers, now named Mac and Mac, ran around their feet. One day, she suggested he write down his stories to preserve them. He was a bit apprehensive at first, but then he sat down one day and easily wrote 30 pages. Anahareo eventually convinced him to send one of his stories to Country Life magazine, and to their surprise, the magazine accepted the story and then asked for more. Meanwhile, the couple built a beaver colony on a lake near their home, which created a refuge for the area. But the couple was shocked and saddened when one of their friends, Dave Whitestone, gave Archie a beaver pelt as a gift. Now, he thought it was a good gift. He wanted to do something nice, but he had no idea how Archie and Anahareo felt about beavers. She wrote, "Dave killed all the beaver on the lake, believing he was doing us a good turn. His deed, instead, had destroyed the very groundwork of our plans." The couple moved 40 kilometers away and built a new cabin for themselves and their beavers. And Mac explored the nearby lake and attempted to coax Anahareo and Archie to come with them, but they were too busy with chores. Anahareo regretted that decision for the rest of her life. She wrote, "That was the last time we were to see them." For days, the couple searched for their beaver with no luck, and it soon became apparent that they had been killed. And when their friend Dave heard about the loss and how awful they felt, he felt guilty and decided at that moment to make it up to them. When he found 2 orphan beaver kits, he brought them to Anahareo and Archie, and the couple were overjoyed to have new beavers in their lives and named them Sugarloaf and Jelly Roll. And their home felt more complete and things were looking up once more. Archie's writing was gaining notoriety, and one day he was asked to speak in a nearby town about his life and experiences. That then led to more speaking engagements throughout eastern Canada, and soon he was in high demand. In the summer of 1930, the federal government commissioned a film, The Beaver People, which featured Archie, Anahareo, and their beavers. And that's when Archie started to publicly go by Grey Owl. And while Archie was away, Anahareo looked for ways to keep busy. She even traveled north with David Whitestone to help him on one of his mining claims and quickly discovered she had a love of prospecting. That newfound passion would do her well over the next decade because soon the couple would be traveling west. The government had offered Archie a position as a park caretaker at Riding Mountain National Park in Manitoba, and by the spring of 1931, the couple, along with Sugarloaf and Jelly Roll, were on their way. Almost as soon as they arrived at their new cabin, a second film, The Beaver Family, was shot. Unfortunately, the land wasn't really optimal for the beavers, and Archie asked for a transfer. The couple then moved to Prince Albert National Park in Saskatchewan, where the habitat was better for beavers. But Archie wasn't around much, and the couple began to grow distant. He was often away on speaking engagements across North America, where he was busy writing books, so Anahareo was left alone. She often ventured into the wilderness as she turned to prospecting, and the couple rarely saw each other, especially after she heard there was unclaimed land in Labrador. She made the long journey there only to find out that 2 men had seen the same outcropping while flying over the area. Anahareo had missed staking a claim by a mere 28 days and was devastated when she learned that the claim was sold for $70,000, or about $1.5 million today. She returned home where she finally reconnected with Archie. The couple got pregnant by late 1931, but that didn't mean they were close. Archie spent the whole winter completely preoccupied by his writing and slowly drove Anahareo crazy. She said that all she could hear was the scratch of his pen. And that led to more arguments, including over whether Archie should take a bath, because he hated baths. Somehow the couple survived, and it helped that Archie was once again traveling. In fact, he was away so much that he missed the birth of his daughter. Shirley Dawn was born on August 23, 1932. Archie arrived 3 days later, but spent most of his time talking about his journey rather than showing interest in his daughter. He also referred to the baby as it, which deeply hurt Anahareo. The sting caused her to pull away a bit, But he barely noticed, and by the summer of 1933, she was feeling the itch to explore once again. She left Shirley Dawn in the care of a trusted friend so she could prospect in the Churchill River area in Labrador. She was gone for the entire summer. A year later, she left for Wollaston Lake in the barren lands of the Canadian North. For that, she was gone for an entire year. Her long absences began to anger Archie, who wrote to her saying, "Your coming and going as you see fit puts me in an awkward position. I know exactly what they are thinking of me. I used to think the same of John. His wife was an actress who spent most of her time in New York. Anyway, we used to think that John was a sucker." Deeply hurt by his letter, especially considering how distant both physically and emotionally they had become, Anahareo vowed not to return until he asked her to. That didn't happen until August 1935, when he informed her that he was going on a speaking tour of England and asked her to come home. Upon her return to Prince Albert National Park, she spent 3 weeks sewing an indigenous outfit for him out of 5 moose hides and 2 pounds of beads. Then he left and returned in April 1936. By now, they were essentially strangers. They had spent too much time apart living different lives. Gone were the days of just the two of them in the bush together. Now Archie belonged to the world, and Anahareo wanted a new life for herself and her daughter. The couple agreed to separate briefly, and Archie gave Anahareo a $50 a month allowance. By September 1936, the separation became permanent. Archie remarried a few months later, but many believe that his soulmate was always Anahareo, and he was hers. Less than a year later, in June 1937, Anahareo gave birth to a second daughter, but she never revealed who the father was. Some suspected it may have been Archie. Regardless, she was now a single Indigenous mother in the Great Depression, and she struggled to provide for her children. In the end, she made the difficult decision to allow her second daughter to be adopted by a couple from Calgary. Meanwhile, she watched as Archie thrived with constant work as his fame grew. But it came at a cost to his health, which wasn't helped by his alcoholism. By April 1938, he was in such poor health that he was admitted to a hospital in Prince Albert. On April 12th, Anahareo went to the hospital to see him but was told that Archie was sleeping and resting well. So she decided to return the next day, but that night he fell into a coma. Before he did, he asked for Anahareo. The next day, he died. Anahareo wrote with regret, quote, "If only I had gone to the hospital that night." The day after Archie died, the North Bay Nugget published a piece it had been holding on to for 3 years. On April 14th, 1938, they announced to the world that Grey Owl was a full-blooded Englishman. Many wondered how Anahareo, a Mohawk woman, didn't know that he wasn't Indigenous. She explained that she never thought to question his story and later said, quote, "When finally I was convinced that Archie was English, I had the awful feeling for all those years I'd been married to a ghost that the man who now lay buried at Ajawan was someone I had never known and that Archie had never really existed." She was once again living between two worlds. Anahareo knew that Archie had given the world many wonderful things, including his writing. She had lived beside him for years and knew that although he had lied to her and many others, his writing and experience had helped to save the beaver from being hunted out of existence. Anahareo attempted to defend Archie's legacy even further in 1940 with her book, My Life with Grey Owl. But the publisher made changes that she felt did not do the man she loved justice. It also didn't help her financial situation, so she just pressed on. And that's when she met Eric Moltke. He was a Swedish count who had moved to Canada in the mid-1920s, and he didn't care about her past with Archie or the fact that she was an unwed mother. By 1940, the couple got married in Winnipeg. But soon after, problems started to appear, partly because Eric tended to drink too much. Together they had one daughter, Catherine, who was born while Eric was overseas serving in the Second World War. When he returned, the nightmare of war stayed with him and his drinking worsened. The couple separated in 1947, and during this time Anahareo traveled with her daughters to Prince Albert, where she became a cook on a farm. The following year, Eric got a job in Canmore, Alberta, and Anahareo reunited with him, but things weren't better. Eric suffered a severe workplace accident in 1953 that left him permanently disabled and unable to work, and his drinking spiraled heavily. By 1959, Anahareo had had enough and left him. She moved in with Shirley Dawn while Catherine went to beauty school. Eric died in 1963. By then, there was a growing interest in the environment. People were less concerned with Archie's lies of his background and more interested in his efforts to protect nature. His cabin in Prince Albert was also restored and eventually became a National Historic Site. His legacy as Grey Owl was fed by stories that were either false or sensationalized. They were all sold by people looking to make a quick buck, so Anahareo decided to finally set the record straight. In 1972, she published Devil in Deerskins, My Life with Grey Owl. That title was inspired by Archie, who had planned to name his final book Devil in Deerskins. According to Anahareo, he had always planned to reveal to the world he was not Indigenous. Her book was a massive success and became a bestseller. She was suddenly thrust into the limelight and did interviews across Canada about her life and relationship with Archie. And with her new fame, she decided to do what she had inspired Archie to do decades earlier. She was going to help the animals she cared for. So she joined the Association for the Protection of Fur-Bearing Animals in the mid-1970s, where she tirelessly fought to ban leg-hold traps and poisons in the fur industry. In 1979, Anahareo was made a member of the Order of Nature of the International League for Human Rights, and 4 years later, she received Canada's highest honour, the Order of Canada. By the spring of 1986, she was visiting the Grey Owl Society in Hastings, England, when Anahareo suddenly fell ill. She quickly returned home, but her health worsened. On June 17, 1986, Anahareo died in Kamloops. She was 1 day short of her 80th birthday. Her body was transported to Prince Albert National Park, where she was buried next to Archie, to rest eternally with the man that she loved so deeply. This show is researched, produced, and written by me, Craig Baird, with the help of Dila Velasquez. Audio production by Corey Price. If this is your first time listening and you like what you heard, please take a moment and give us a 5-star review to help other people find these amazing stories. And there are so many for you to sink your teeth into. If you enjoy this podcast, then please check out my other podcasts, From John to Justin, Canada, A Yearly Journey, Pucks and Cups, and Canada's Great War. We love hearing from you, so if you have a show topic you want me to cover, email me at craig@canadaehx.com. Or stop by my website and social media. I'll include all of those in my show notes. Until next time, I'm Craig Baird, and this is Canadian History X.